Usually when we talk about historical heroes, there's this expectation of marble, like a statue in a park, right?
Right, yeah. Very pristine.
Exactly. You read the plaque, it lists their greatest achievement, and the whole narrative is just entirely clean, point A to point B. The hero saw a problem, they solved the problem, and the world cheered.
But reality is, uh, rarely that clean.
No, it's really not. And when you step into the world of medical history, suddenly that pristine marble statue just completely crumbles. Because, well, think about this. Before the internet, before 24/7 globalized media networks, one man orchestrated a vaccine field trial involving 1.8 million children.
I mean, just let that number sink in for a second. 1.8 million.
It's staggering. And he cured a terror that was literally paralyzing the globe. Because of it, he became one of the few scientists in human history with a legitimate, superstar aura. His face was recognized worldwide.
Yeah, he couldn't even get on a commercial airplane without the passengers bursting into standing ovations.
Which, ironically, became his absolute worst nightmare. So welcome to this deep dive. Today, we're immersing ourselves in a comprehensive Wikipedia article detailing the life and work of Jonas Salk.
And our mission for you today is to go way beyond that park plaque. This isn't just a basic biography of the quote-unquote polio guy.
Right, definitely not.
We're looking at a landscape that is deeply human. It's filled with massive institutional friction, incredible pressure, and, frankly, a level of fame that honestly sounds terrifying.
Yeah, we're going to unpack how a working-class kid from the Bronx completely reimagined the role of a medical doctor, walked away from what could have been billions of dollars, and then, his later years dedicated his life to merging hard, objective science with deep human philosophy.
Because before Salk could cure polio, before those standing ovations, he had to break the mold of what a doctor was even supposed to be.
Which starts right at the beginning, with his upbringing. It was intensely meritocratic. Salk was born in New York City to Jewish immigrant parents. His mother, Dora, actually emigrated from Minsk when she was 12. And neither of his parents had much formal education.
And, that lack of formal education in the parents, it often translates into this fierce, laser-focused drive for their children's education, especially in immigrant families navigating the early 20th century.
Right, they see education as the only way up.
Exactly. So Salk's environment was highly competitive. By age 13, he's at Townsend Harris Hall Prep School. This was a public school specifically for intellectually gifted kids, mostly the sons of immigrants who lacked the pedigree or the money for those elite private schools.
I read that the environment there was basically a pressure cooker.
Oh, absolutely. The school motto was literally study, study, study. They crammed a 4-year curriculum into 3 years. You either survived the academic gauntlet or you just washed out.
Wow. And if you survived, you usually had the grades to get into the City College of New York, CCNY, which Salk actually did at the age of 15.
That's incredible.
Yeah, 15. And CCNY was crucial to understanding his worldview. It was fiercely meritocratic, the competition was brutal, but tuition was free.
Right, which was a game changer.
Completely. As his biographer points out in our source material, the rules there were fairly applied. No one got an advantage based on, an accident of birth. It was pure intellectual survival of the fittest.
And what's really fascinating is that the physical facilities at CCNY were apparently barely second-rate.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they had no real research labs, a completely inadequate library. But the student body was so driven that from those ranks emerged 8 Nobel Prize winners.
That is wild. No labs, but 8 Nobel winners.
Right. It shows the peer group mattered infinitely more than the physical resources.
Which brings us to this massive point of friction in his early life. Salk gets his bachelor's degree in chemistry, and his mother, Dora, she desperately wants him to be a lawyer.
Because law represented safety. It was prestige, a guaranteed income during the Great Depression.
Right. But Salk decides to pivot to medical school instead. And he takes a massive risk, not just financially, but socially, because the institutional barriers of the 1930s were just towering.
They really were. He ends up choosing New York University Medical School. And the reason why is deeply telling of the era. He chose NYU because tuition was comparatively low. And crucially, they did not discriminate against Jewish students.
Yeah, let's talk about the reality of that era's institutional barriers, because it's stark.
It is. In 1935, Yale accepted 76 applicants out of a pool of 501. 200 of those total applicants were Jewish. Guess how many Yale accepted?
Oh, man, I don't know, 20?
Exactly 5 of them.
Wow, 5.
Yeah, there were rigid, unapologetic quotas in place at the Ivy League medical schools. So NYU became this incredible haven for concentrated, marginalized talent.
Okay, let's unpack this because here's the real turning point. Salk is at NYU. He is brilliant. He's at the top of his class. He gets elected to Alpha Omega Alpha.
Which is basically the Phi Beta Kappa of medical schools. It's the highest academic honor society you can get into.
Right. But he stands out to his peers for a completely different reason. He realizes he doesn't actually want to practice medicine. Treating individual patients, for him, it felt too small.
It's like he realized treating patients was like running a retail business.
Exactly. A retail business dealing with one customer at a time. He wanted to be in wholesale, saving millions of people all at once. So he turns to laboratory research. But I have to push back a little here on the source material.
Okay, what's your thought?
Was this shift away from patient care driven purely by some, I don't know, grand altruism for humankind? Or was he simply a guy who was just obsessed with the mechanical puzzle of the laboratory? Like, did he just prefer the predictability of viruses over the messiness of actual people?
That's a great question. And what's fascinating here is that Salk's own words suggest it was really a synthesis of both.
Oh, really? Both?
Yeah, in interviews later in life, he explicitly stated that his original ambition was to be of help to humankind in a larger sense than just a one-to-one basis. He said he was interested in things human.
Okay, so the altruism was definitely there.
It was. But the mechanism to achieve that scale was the laboratory puzzle. During a 2-month elective in his postgraduate work, he worked in a virology lab at the University of Michigan with Thomas Francis.
And Francis had recently discovered the type B influenza virus, right?
Exactly. That specific laboratory work gave a completely new direction to Salk's life. He found that by carefully designing experiments, you could manipulate a virus, destroy its infectivity, and still immunize the host.
Which is the core of it all.
Right. The mechanics of immunization became his life's obsession, precisely because it was the key to unlocking that mass-scale altruism he desired.
And that desire for wholesale impact leads him directly to the era's most terrifying challenge, which was polio. It's 1947. He gets his own lab at the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine. And soon he is backed by the National Foundation for Infantile Paralysis, which, we now know as the March of Dimes.
Yeah, the March of Dimes. And the funding they poured into this was astronomical. By 1955, the funding hit $67 million.
$67 million?
Yeah, and that level of funding was driven by pure, unadulterated public terror. Polio was a seasonal nightmare.
It really was. People were terrified of the summer.
Exactly. It was closing swimming pools, emptying movie theaters, paralyzing thousands of children every single summer. The March of Dimes mobilized 100 million contributors and 7 million volunteers.
Wow. 7 million volunteers.
It was a literal national war effort directed at a virus.
Yeah.
And Salk was positioned right at the tip of the spear. But his scientific approach went completely against the grain of his most prominent peers.
Yeah, the science here is a massive point of contention. Salk insisted on using a killed virus for his vaccine. Meanwhile, his peers, most notably Albert Sabin, were heavily invested in developing live attenuated vaccines.
Right. Sabin and the scientific establishment believed that to get a robust, long-lasting immune response, you had to infect the body with a weakened, living form of the polio virus. They thought it had to mimic a natural infection.
But Salk thought that was too dangerous.
Exactly. He believed that was an unacceptable and unnecessary risk. He theorized you could chemically kill the virus so it couldn't reproduce and cause paralysis, but still leave it intact enough for the immune system to recognize it and build antibodies.
Here's where it gets really interesting if you want a way to visualize this. Using Salk's killed virus is basically like showing the body's immune system a highly detailed mugshot of a criminal.
I like that analogy.
Right. The body studies the photo, learns exactly what the threat looks like so it knows who to look for and destroy if the real thing ever shows up. Sabin's live virus, on the other hand, is like taking the actual criminal, weakening them, taking away their weapons, and sending them into your house.
Yeah, Sabin argued the body needs to spar with a real live opponent to get truly strong.
But Salk looked at that and thought, why risk sending the criminal into the house at all when the mugshot works and is infinitely safer?
Exactly. But to create that perfect mugshot, Salk relied on formaldehyde. And this was an incredibly delicate chemical balancing act.
How so?
Well, he had to find the exact concentration of formaldehyde and the exact duration of exposure. If he used too little, the virus remained alive and the vaccine would literally give children polio.
Oh, wow. That's a terrifying margin of error.
Right, but if you use too much formaldehyde, the virus's surface proteins would denature. The mugshot would get blurred, basically, the immune system wouldn't recognize it, and the vaccine would be completely useless. So he spent years perfecting that exact chemical sweet spot.
And he was so confident in that sweet spot that after successful animal tests, he actually injected the experimental vaccine into himself, his wife, and his own children. This was in 1953.
He boiled his own family syringes on his kitchen stove.
I mean, can you imagine just boiling syringes on the stove next to dinner? But that intense belief leads directly to 1954 and this logistical miracle of a trial, the polio pioneers.
Yeah, they tested this vaccine on 1.8 million school children. It was the most elaborate program of its kind in history. 20,000 physicians, 64,000 school personnel, 220,000 volunteers.
It's hard to overstate how big this was. A 1954 Gallup poll showed that more Americans knew about the polio field trials than could give the full name of the U.S. president.
That is just wild. The entire nation was holding its breath.
And then the exhale. On April 12, 1955, the announcement was broadcast over radio networks worldwide. The vaccine was safe, effective, and potent.
The relief was palpable globally. Salk's inactivated polio vaccine was immediately pushed into use. Within a few years, it had reached about 90 countries.
Domestic transmission of polio in the United States was eliminated in less than 25 years. Salk had successfully run his wholesale operation. He had literally saved millions.
But, the very success of that wholesale operation basically ruins his private life.
Yeah, it completely destroyed it. He's thrust into this intense, blistering, global spotlight. And the sources make it very clear he absolutely hated it.
Salk was a guy who liked his privacy. He wanted to be at his lab bench. But suddenly he's a folk hero. Airplane pilots are announcing his presence over the intercom. Hotels are automatically upgrading him to penthouses.
He's getting presidential citations, foreign decorations, thousands of letters.
The journalist Ed Murrow captured the irony of it perfectly. He told Salk, "Young man, a great tragedy has befallen you. You've lost your anonymity."
Man, what a quote.
Right. And Salk himself later said it was as if he became public property, having to constantly respond to external impulses rather than his own internal drive.
It had to have severely altered his relationships with his colleagues, too.
Oh, completely. He was no longer just a scientist, he was a celebrity. And the academic scientific community generally does not trust celebrity. They thought he was a showboat, even though he was desperately trying to avoid the cameras.
Which is so unfair. But the absolute pinnacle of this celebrity mythos happens on Ed Murrow's television show. Murrow asks Salk, "Who owns the patent on this vaccine?" And Salk gives this incredibly poetic answer. He says, "The people, I would say. There is no patent. Could you patent the sun?"
It is one of the most famous quotes in medical history.
It really is. And estimates suggest that the vaccine would have been worth around $7 billion if it had been patented. Salk just walked away from that.
It perfectly encapsulates the image of the selfless, altruistic scientist dedicating his life to the public good.
But so what does this all actually mean? Because we need to look closely at the source material here. Did Salk genuinely sacrifice $7 billion out of pure poetic altruism?
Yeah.
Or is the patent the sun, quote, actually just a brilliant piece of PR spin to cover up the fact that his lawyers told him he couldn't patent it anyway?
This is where the marble statue gets some real texturing. Because the source material notes that lawyers from the National Foundation for Infantile Paralysis absolutely did look into patenting the vaccine.
Oh, they definitely looked into it.
They heavily investigated it. But their patent attorney concluded that Salk's techniques lacked what the law calls patentable novelty.
Patentable novelty, meaning it wasn't a totally new invention.
Exactly. Because Salk was building on known techniques of using formaldehyde to inactivate viruses, the lawyer said any patent would be of doubtful value due to prior art.
Okay, and prior art just means the foundational concept already existed in the public domain.
Right. Salk didn't invent the fundamental concept of a killed virus. He just optimized the chemical application specifically for polio.
So legally, patenting the sun wasn't a billion-dollar button he could just press. The framework wasn't really there.
It wasn't. However, we shouldn't become cynical about his motives here.
Right, it's easy to swing too far the other way.
Exactly. Salk showed zero interest in personal wealth throughout his entire life. He literally categorized making money alongside buying mink coats and Cadillacs. He thought they were completely unnecessary distractions.
Even if he could have patented it, he probably wouldn't have.
Right. Even if he could have legally patented a small specific piece of the manufacturing process, he almost certainly wouldn't have. He deliberately chose not to seek profit to maximize the vaccine's global distribution.
So the patent the sun, quote, might not be a legally comprehensive breakdown of intellectual property law, but it was absolutely philosophically authentic to who Jonas Salk was.
Perfectly said. Yes.
And that distinction is so important. He was an incredibly authentic guy who felt hunted by the press and alienated from his peers. And that intense psychological pressure directly drives his next massive pivot.
Yeah. Desperate to escape the paparazzi-like scientific fame, he uses his newfound leverage to engineer a secluded physical sanctuary.
But he didn't just want to build a biology lab. He wanted to build a fortress for the human soul. He wanted to bridge the exact gap that caused his peers to ostracize him in the first place.
So he founds the Salk Institute in 1963 in La Jolla, California. And Salk's vision here is deeply moving. He didn't want a sterile, isolated facility where biologists only talk to biologists.
Right, he wanted cross-pollination.
He partnered with the renowned architect Louis Kahn to build a complex that would investigate biological phenomena from cell to society. Kahn designed the facility to functionally force collaboration.
How did he do that architecturally?
He created wide-open laboratory spaces with no dividing walls, which could be easily reconfigured. He put blackboards along the outside concrete walks. The deliberate architecture was meant to encourage spontaneous Socratic encounters between completely different types of thinkers.
Just imagine walking to get a coffee and you end up doing complex equations on a wall outside with a Nobel laureate or debating ethics with a philosopher.
Francis Crick, the co-discoverer of the structure of DNA, actually became a leading professor there.
Wow. So Salk explicitly wanted to merge what he called the alienated two cultures of science and humanism. He wanted artists, philosophers, and biologists eating lunch together, forcing a cross-fertilization of ideas.
And this is where we see the final evolution of Jonas Salk. From a working-class student to a virologist to what the New York Times called the father of biophilosophy.
Biophilosophy. It's such a fascinating concept. Salk defined it as the application of a biological evolutionary point of view to philosophical, cultural, social, and psychological problems.
He believed that humanity was undergoing a fundamental, epical shift. He argued that in the past, humanity was dominated by death and high mortality. Our attitudes were strictly anti-death and anti-disease.
Like, we just wanted to survive the winter.
Exactly. But he foresaw a future where, because of scientific advancements, our attitudes would shift to be pro-life and pro-health.
He viewed humans as co-authors with nature. He believed that through the emergence of our consciousness, our awareness, and our capacity to imagine the future, we have actually become the process of evolution itself.
We are no longer just reacting to nature, we are directing it.
And he lived this philosophy. Even in his later years, he continued taking what he called prudent risks. He researched a vaccine for HIV and AIDS when many wouldn't touch it. He became one of the original signatories of the Ashley-Montagu Resolution, advocating against the genital mutilation of children.
He was constantly looking at how biology intersects with human suffering and social norms. If we connect this to the bigger picture, Salk was trying to tell us that biological knowledge provides incredibly useful frameworks for understanding human nature itself.
Right, like we shouldn't just think of biology in terms of practical drugs or vaccines.
No, we should use biological principles to understand how we cooperate, how our societies adapt, and how we manage the environments we create.
Which makes me wonder, if Salk were sitting right here at the table with us today, how do you think he would apply this biophilosophy to how we handle the modern epidemic of information overload? Like the constant digital barrage you face on your phone every minute. Are we adapting to it, or are we just barely surviving it?
That's a great application of his ideas. I think Salk, the biophilosopher, would look at our digital ecosystem as a massive evolutionary pressure cooker.
A pressure cooker.
Yeah, just as a physical virus forces a biological immune system to adapt or perish, information overload is forcing our collective mental consciousness to adapt. I think he would argue that right now, society is still stuck in the anti-disease phase of the internet.
That's interesting. So we're just playing defense.
Exactly. We are just trying to fight off the misinformation, the burnout, the constant anxiety. True adaptation, applying his biophilosophy, would require us to deliberately move to a pro-health model.
So going from surviving to thriving.
Right. We need to consciously co-author a new digital environment that cultivates our creativity, our focus, and our well-being, rather than just surviving the daily noise. He would remind us that we have the unique capacity to choose from among alternatives, and we need to make better choices about our digital habitats.
Co-authors of a new digital environment. That perfectly captures the empowerment he was trying to instill in us.
It really does.
So, as we bring this deep dive home, let's recap the incredible arc we've traced today. We started with a working-class kid from the Bronx, driven by his immigrant mother, leveraging the ruthless meritocracy and free tuition of CCNY.
We saw him pivot from the retail business of treating individual patients to treating humanity wholesale.
We watched him break the entrenched rules of virology to champion the killed virus vaccine, obsessively perfecting the chemical balance of formaldehyde to safely give the immune system a mugshot of polio.
And we examined the legal and philosophical nuance behind his famous rejection of a multi-billion-dollar patent, navigating the space between the reality of prior art and his profound personal ethics.
And finally, we followed his escape from the crushing weight of global fame to Jolla, where he transitioned from fighting the viruses of the body to exploring the limitless potential of the human mind, viewing us all as conscious architects of our own evolution.
He firmly believed that a risk-free society would become a dead-end society. Without progress, without prudent risks, we stagnate.
And he refused to stagnate.
He did. Which raises an important question, and it's the thought I want to leave you with today. Right before his death in 1995, the source material notes that Salk was working on a new book. It was privately reported to be titled Millennium of the Mind.
Millennium of the Mind, wow. That almost sounds like he viewed the brain and our collective consciousness as the next great frontier of human immunity.
Exactly. Consider this. If Jonas Salk, the man who conquered the great viral terror of the physical body in the 20th century, was turning his attention entirely to the mind, what exactly did he foresee for this new millennium?
That's a profound thought.
Are the crises of truth, connection, and mental health we face today the exact evolutionary hurdles he was preparing to write about? We no longer need his vaccine for polio, but we might be in desperate need of his cure for the mind.
The marble statue crumbles, and underneath we find a blueprint for our own evolution. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.